I get the feeling, Janet, if you utilize all those gifts, you might be able to keep up with where Chris is and what he's doing. Maybe.
Oh, Mike, I'm so pleased to have Janet on board because she brings exactly the skills we need
Oh,
to
brother.
keep your DS in line. So I think that's very important. So she's
Yes.
already started, which is great. So very good. So I'm sorry, Janet, I didn't think to hit the record button before you shared all that. So everybody notice we may actually for you to show up on the recording, you're going to have to say something. So why don't you just say your name and where you live and so folks can so you'll show up in the window on the recording real quick.
Okay, I'm Janet Castro. I'm the new DA for the Eastern South Central District, and I hope I can keep Chris in line.
Very good. All right. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. It's great. It's great to have Janet on board. It really is. So, okay. So let's jump in then. I only have a few things to mention really this evening. Mostly it's about annual conference that's coming up in June 20th through the 23rd. Just a reminder to everybody, make sure that you've got somebody attending either in person in Casper or online. Either one is welcome. We want to make sure churches are represented though. So if your lay member that you elected from your church is not registered yet, make sure that they are and they're ready to go. If your church does not have a lay member to send, an elected lay member for your charge, every church is entitled to send one as an equalization member. And so those forms are available. Janet put our emails in the chat. You can either, myself or Janet, either one, will be able to send you that form if you need it. Send that to us, get it back to us as quick as you can, and we'll send you the code to register because equalization members get an 80% discount on your registration fee. So we want to make sure and get as many people in there as possible, and that especially makes it super affordable if you're going to attend online for you to go. It's the same fee for online or in person because it costs us money both for people in person and to make the online stuff work. We have a company come out from Georgia to help us with all of that. And so we've got to pay them. So, but it makes it really affordable if you're staying home and going to attend online. So we want to make sure that happens.
Chris, we're having trouble in Senate finding an equalization member. I mean, but so I was wondering, can the equalization member for Alamosa also represent Sender if we don't find anybody, because we're having a hard time finding one.
Yeah, if you can't find somebody, that's fine. I just want to make sure that everybody knows that we have plenty of spaces available. So if there is somebody that you've got, we have plenty of room in our equalization tally for this year. Yeah.
Okay. So, thanks.
Yep. All right. One thing that'll happen in person in Casper on that Thursday night, the 20th, we will have our district get together that evening. For the past several years, that's been a time that we've shared over a meal. This time it won't. Thursday is the day at annual conference for our mission engagement activities, and then the mission engagement dinner. We'll have that all together, everybody who's there, and then we'll break out after dinner for our district get together. So there will be instructions there on where to go and all of that. But that'll be a fun thing for us to fellowship and talk about what's going on in our part of the conference during that time. In preparation for annual conference, the Council on Finance and Administration for the conference is going to be having a webinar on June 11th, and I'm going to put the link in the chat so that you can get to the webinar, the Responsible Stewardship webinar page on our conference website. There we go. That'll get you to a lot of stuff. They do the Responsible Stewardship folks do a webinar every month, and those you can attend live. It's a Zoom. You register, and they'll send you the link for that on this webpage I just posted. or you can watch the recording, and you can go to the same page. It has the register now button for upcoming webinars, but also has the recordings of webinars going all the way back to 2020. So you can take a look and see if there are any of those. I would encourage especially pastors and finance chairs and church council chairs, lay leaders to attend or to view those that look pertinent to your work. But excuse me, the one on the 11th is going to be reviewing the 2025 budget for the annual conference. So if you're curious about that, this will be a chance for you to see kind of the process that puts that together and what that looks like. It'll be the total budget is going to be a small increase over this last year's budget. But one of the interesting, and this is a little bit in the weeds, general conference that we're going to talk about later. One of the things they do is set the denominational budget for the next 4 years, and they set that. And one of the they had a dramatic decrease because of the change in size of our denomination after the disaffiliations of the last several years, and so the apportionment that they're going to ask of our annual conference is reducing substantially, and it won't change what we have in our budget because what they're asking of us is reducing basically to what we've been paying for the last several years. We haven't been paying. This is getting too far in for many of us, but 2016 was the last time that we had a general conference put a budget together, and so what they were asking from 2016 over the last several years reduced substantially as our general church agencies have contracted and shrunk and begun working at making their own money for their agencies in addition to what the church is providing. So anyway, that's just to say that our budget is staying about the same. There's a little bit of an increase, but a lot of that has to do with staffing, staff cost of living adjustments and that sort of thing. So, and what we foresee based on what our revenue's been the last several years. So if you'd like to hear more about that, June 11th is the day for you to do that. And that too will be recorded and put on the website in case you're not able to attend. All right. Any questions about annual conference coming up? I guess the last thing I'd say, registration goes through May 31st. So if you or your church person is not registered yet, you've got another week to get that done in a timely way for regular registration. And there'll be some time after that for late registration, but to get in there in the next week would be great. All right, any questions about annual conference or thoughts about annual conference? Barbara?
No, I don't have any thoughts.
Okay, sorry, you were unmuted. Anna, you were unmuted. Just want to make sure I didn't miss anybody.
Oh.
That's okay if you don't have anything. That's fine. Not a problem. All right, good. Well, if you have any come up in the next few minutes, be sure and put it in the chat or raise your hand and we'll talk about it. There's a few things that we heard about earlier today. First of all, I extend regrets from Travis and from Travis Walker, our CRM, and from Cindy Snodgrass and Susan Wheeler. They all had other things scheduled for this evening. But Travis just wanted to let everybody know about his summer schedule. He's working on getting around the district to know more churches and to help with visioning conversations and technology questions and that sort of thing. He is doing a great job of getting acquainted with our large geography of our district and doing a good job where he is doing his thing. The other thing that we wanted to make sure and get out to you were some lay servant ministry training opportunities that Cindy and Susan shared with us today. And we don't actually have specific dates for you, but we have things for you to watch out for. There's going to be a basic lay servant ministry class in person in Olney Springs this summer. That'll be close to some of you. The Front Range District, the Colorado Front Range District, is going to be doing a basic lay servant ministry class in July. Not sure if that's going to have an online component or not, but it's close to some of our folks. And then in Grand Junction, and this one they do think is going to have an online component, they'll be having an advanced class on worship in September, so this fall. So if you are, or folks in your church would be interested in doing some of that lay servant ministry training, to kind of grow our discipleship toolboxes in the district, there will be some opportunities, and David Erickson will be helping us get connected with that. We'll get Janet connected with David so the two of them can make sure that information gets out there. One of the other things that got brought up was the conference calendar that's on the conference website. We haven't generally over the last couple of years haven't had a ton of things listed on there. We're hoping that Janet can help us be a little more cognizant of that calendar so that we'll have our stuff on there. Every district has a tab, and we want to make sure and get as much on there as we can, so folks can be informed that way as well. So, and I will lift up once again how important it is. So many. It happens way too often that people say they just don't feel connected with the conference. We have regular newsletters, half a dozen different newsletters that go out of the course of the month. Basic, a basic newsletter that has a broad spectrum of information, but then there are departmental newsletters that go out. And so if you go to the conference website, on the front page at the top, there's a red button that says subscribe. And you can press that button and you can check which of those newsletters you'd like to receive. You don't automatically need to receive them all. You can say, I just want to receive the general one, and I'd like to receive the responsible stewardship one, or I want to receive the mission one, or the youth and young adult ministries one, or that sort of thing. So I'd encourage you to do that. And if there are folks who would like to know more in your church family, please let them know about that. Okay. That is my list. Janet, do you remember anything else that that's pretty much what I had. All right, good. So anybody have anything that you bring tonight? We also had if there's anything from Women in Faith, they were having a general conference recap tonight at the same time as this gathering. So that's where Susan is. Denise, what do you have?
Mission U. Our
yeah.
first live mission U will be June 8th in Utah. It's a one-day event. And then the regular mission U will be taking place in July, as it usually does. And that'll be, I believe, an online. So there'll be more coming out about that later.
Great.
But this is our first live mission U that we've had since before COVID. Wow. So we're kind of excited.
Yeah, I'm glad it's happening, but how sad that that's the case. But that's great. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Very good. So say a word just for folks who aren't familiar with Mission U. What does Mission U consist of?
So Mission U is a joint venture between the conference and United Women in Faith. We have people who are trained, and then we teach classes. The one that we're teaching in Utah is going to be the one on the Lord's Prayer. And so we're going to teach the class on the Lord's Prayer, and we're doing it as a one-day event. Usually when we do them online, it's a one night a week over 4 weeks. And so there's usually a topic, and it's open to men and women usually. So gentlemen, you are invited. It's not just for the ladies. We would like to have more gentlemen come to this. And we do have some men who are on our team. So yeah, it would, and it's usually a very timely topic. So
great.
Yeah. So watch
Fantastic.
for it. It'll be advertised in your churches. So watch for it and think about attending.
Very good. And that'll just be in person for that event, or will there be any online component?
There will be, yeah, there is, Zoom is available for that day as well.
Okay,
So.
great. All right. Well, Janet, help me keep an eye out for that. We'll try to make sure and get that information out when we get it. Awesome. Okay. Anybody else? All right. Well, let's shift then into thinking about General Conference. It happened at the end of April and the beginning of May. A number of things happened there that were significant. It's a very different gathering this time than it has been over the last several decades, for sure. Having the makeup of the denomination change as much as it has in the last several years. We had a quarter of our churches disaffiliate over the last several years, and so the makeup of this General Conference was very different. Some folks have been incredibly inspired and find what the General Conference did incredibly hopeful for our future. Others have been troubled by it, and so I want us to have a good chance tonight. I'd love to hear how your church family how it's landed with your church family, or if it has. I'll just list the several things that the top level description of what happened there. So several things were kind of priorities going into it. One big thing was regionalization. The General Conference passed the changes to our Constitution to change the way we structure our conferences around the world. In case you're not aware, the United States has been its own thing. Annual conferences around the world have been organized in central conferences, and those central conferences for a good while have had the ability to kind of contextually change some of the rules in their within those central conferences to fit where they are. The United States has not had that opportunity. The United States, we've had a very United States centric denomination for the last 50 years. And so what this measure did was to say that the United States will become a regional conference, just like all those other central conferences around the world. So everybody will be in a regional conference, and the United States will be one of those regions, so that the United States can pass measures contextually appropriate for the United States and not imposed on the rest of the world and the United Methodists around the world. So, and they will continue to have the opportunity to do those things themselves. That, since it's a constitution change, means every annual conference around the world is going to vote over the next year or so on those changes and on the regionalization plan and the total aggregate of votes. So it's not a matter of each annual conference having a yes or no and adding up the annual conferences in favor or opposed to it. Each person who votes at annual conference, their vote counts towards the total vote worldwide on those things. So most of our annual conferences in the United States are going to wait to have that vote till next year, so we can have as many people present at annual conferences as possible to vote. And so you want to keep an eye on that. It's an interesting change and a big change for us in the United States in particular to do that. The thing that hit the news the most were the changes that were made to the Book of Discipline around human sexuality. All of the language in the Book of Discipline that was restrictive and descriptive of especially our LGBTQ friends and anything that was the right word anyway, the descriptions about what human sexuality entails, and then also the language around punishment for not abiding by the church's law around that. All of that stuff was removed. Interestingly, we removed all of that, but we didn't put in new restrictions. So, for example, and this is how it hits in the local church, churches now are allowed to have same-sex unions, but not required to have same-sex unions in their churches. Boards of trustees and church councils can set local church policy, building use around same-sex marriages as fits their context and their church. Pastors, just like has always been the case, continue to have discretion about every wedding that they perform, same-sex or not, and that will continue to be the case. No pastors are being forced, no churches are being forced, but they are allowed, and so that's the big change that has happened in our denomination. The social principles, which is a section of the Book of Discipline at the beginning that's been there for decades as well, that's been modified. That a new social principles document will take effect in January. That is a more globally cognizant document as well. The current social principles tend to be very, very U.S. centric, and so the social principles that will take effect in January try to be more aware of our worldwide connection. Those were the big items that happened at General Conference. The relation to us in terms of the West of the United States, we are in jurisdictions, and that all may change if the regionalization plan passes. The United States may decide to change the way it is organized within itself. But how things impact us immediately is through our Western jurisdiction and our bishop for our annual conference. In general, the United States is going to reduce from 39 bishops to 32 bishops, but we in the West are going to keep 5 bishops. That wasn't certain going into General Conference. We have 2 retiring, and we have 3 that were just elected and assigned 2 years ago. So those 3 will probably stay where they are. There are 3 spare bishops in jurisdictions in the United States that are consolidating and where annual conferences are merging. There's an extra bishop in the North Central and in the Southeast and the South Central. So there are 3 extra bishops, and just so happens we need 3 bishops, 1 in the Northeast, and then we need 2. So there is a committee, that interjurisdictional episcopacy committee, it's a mouthful, who are working on determining who those 3 bishops will be, who will be redistributed, and who the 2 will be who will come out west. And so those 2 will come out to our jurisdictional conference in July, and then our jurisdictional episcopacy committee will figure out where they will be assigned. So we will know in the second week or so of July who our bishop will be, and then we'll begin figuring out how to become acquainted with them this fall. So that's kind of our timeline at the moment. So there we go. So that'll be our big jurisdictional news later this summer. In our conference news, as it is. All right, that was a mouthful. So questions first about General Conference. Any questions you have? And then I really want to hear us talk about the impact that it's had where you are. All right, I know I wasn't super clear with all of that, so
Chris,
yeah, hey Amos.
yeah, if regions are created, as you have said, that what has been passed, and there'll be the contextualization of how things will be done in each region. I mean, what else binds us, the US, with the other regions? What exactly will bind them together? Because if the regions will be doing things according to their own context, what are, Yeah, what are some of, are there some policies that will really bind us together or?
Yeah, for sure. That's a great question. Yeah, we'll continue to have a general book of discipline that applies to the whole denomination. So there will still be a book of discipline that everybody is subject to, but there will just be opportunities for each of those regions to do things that are particular. Like one example, and I'm not super up to speed on the details of this, but it's very different. For example, the pension plan is very different, for example, in the United States than in the Philippines, right?
Okay.
So being able to, so if there are particular things that need to happen in a particular setting that don't apply elsewhere, and a lot of it has to do with those kind of logistical things. There are places in our connection where the new stance on human sexuality is not going to go over well. I mean, there are places in Africa where, expressing your sexuality in anything other than a straight expression is a criminal offense, right? And so for our African friends to be able to make statements contextually around what they endorse is going to be really important. So that's another example. How we pay bishops can be different in different settings, and so there are a number of different ways, but there will be one book of discipline that applies to everybody as well. That's a great question. Yeah. All right. Any other questions? Then I'll just ask for your feedback. All right. So I need somebody to take the bull by the horns and be our first person to talk about how you and/or the people in your church have heard what happened at General Conference, and if I can share a little bit that we heard earlier today. But it runs the gamut in our district, from people being really troubled to people being really excited and happy. So I'd love to hear more about how that has played out in your church.
Well, I can start and tell you that I saw a lot of excitement in First UMC Alamosa when I talked about it and said what the General Conference had passed. And so there was a lot of excitement at Alamosa, but there was none in Center United Methodist Church. I think people are not really concerned about it, and either they were not excited or they were not really concerned about it. There was a lack of emotions on that. Yeah, that's what I recognized.
Good. Yeah, thanks, Amos. Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. Yeah. Who else?
With that saying, Pueblo, there's been no reaction at all. Haven't heard a peep, actually. And I think I do have some people that I'm pretty close to that I've asked if they had questions or want to know what's going on. And their perspective is, I mean, this is ludicrous, I know, but their perspective is, what's the big deal? We've been living into this reality where we are now for 5 to 7 years. We've already been living in this. We've already been in this flow. We've lost people, but this is what we've been doing already. So there were no party poppers popped or anything. It was just, we're just carrying on business as usual.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think our conference has been at the epicenter of all of this, and most of our churches really had the biggest impact in 2019 and 2020, really, in terms of people staying or leaving and that sort of thing. So I think that is a common experience of this, Mike. The folks who have been most concerned have been folks who lean to the traditional side on these matters, and we're wondering if the denomination was going to extend the opportunity to disaffiliate for local churches. That was not done. The measure that expired in December was not re-added to the Book of Discipline. So, just FYI, if there are churches that want to leave the denomination, they still can, just like they could before, but it'll be a different process now. I think, we've got some churches that some folks have left in the last couple of weeks just because of this change in the denomination's position. I think that will continue to happen. I and we kind of felt that there was going to be another season of sorting that would happen here after General Conference, and that's happening. One of the things that I shared with churches when the disaffiliation conversations were happening was that for the most part, people know where they stand on this issue, and the big deal with disaffiliation was whether we could live, whether a person or a congregation could live in a denomination that was going to be more of a big tent denomination. And I think the challenge for our annual conference being that numerically, at least, it leans much more in the progressive direction, is to make sure that when we say all means all and that we are inclusive, that we are very conscious that that includes all of our traditionalist friends who have stayed with us, and that's something I'm very conscious of in our district, and that I continue to lift up with folks who really are banging the drum and shooting off confetti about the changes. I want them to make sure they are remembering how they felt before, when they felt like they were marginalized, because in our conference, it's not an exaggeration, I think, to say that many of our traditionalist friends are feeling more marginalized now, and we got to be really conscious of what it means, that we're all still in this together. So there are a lot of ways that can go. I think there'll be some churches, and you all, it may be in your churches, it may be in ones that you hear about, churches that have not had the conversations, the basic conversations around human sexuality in the Bible and our tradition in churches, that may need to have some of those now. They were trying to ignore it for the last several years, and now they're not being able to, or they need to explore it in a different way, and we want to make sure and facilitate those conversations where they need to happen. So keep your ears open and be in touch with me if folks in your church or elsewhere need to have those conversations now or in the future. So,
Chris, if they changed some wording other than in the Book of Discipline, they haven't changed prayers, they haven't changed Bible, they haven't changed that kind of thing.
No,
it's only in the Book of Discipline as to whether the pastor and that type of thing.
Yeah. I mean, back in 1972 was when the first controversy around this landed, and that was when the denomination through General Conference voted to say that homosexuality was not, the practice of homosexuality was not compatible with Christian teaching. And so that was removed this year, and that will not be in the next Book of Discipline, that language. Like I say, in large part, we're going back to what the Book of Discipline was originally with the United Methodist Church in 1968, and around these questions, so that it really becomes a more contextual thing. If a congregation, we have a lot of congregations that are reconciling congregations that have for years been inclusive and welcoming and affirming of LGBTQ folks, and we have a lot of congregations still that can't imagine doing that and are very, very traditional where they are. And the Methodist Church, United Methodist Church, has been remarkable in its ability to hold that tension, even in the midst of all the conflict that we've had around it. So those things are not going to be at the forefront of our conversations anymore. But that's the gist of it, Barbara. That those places where what has been considered harmful language by many of our friends for years has just been removed, and it hasn't been replaced with the opposite statement, but it's been removed so it can't hurt anybody anymore.
So is this opening the door for more and more LGBTQ ministers to be put out into more traditional churches?
Good
How
question.
should I say that?
Right. No, that's the perfect way to put it. So it's always been possible that an LGBT, especially in our conference, an LGBTQ pastor could be appointed anywhere. But the Book of Discipline requires a consultation process with every church when an appointment is being made there. In our conference, a very conscious part of that consultation is to ask the SPRC team and whoever's present in that consultation, is your church both open to and ready for an LGBTQ pastor to be appointed here? And in many of the churches in our district in particular, the answer is no. And if that's the case, the cabinet is very, very conscious of that. And while it is possible within our polity and our Book of Discipline to make an LGBTQ appointment anywhere, it is silly. And for example, our cabinet, for example, will not make that appointment. If the answer is no, that will not be done. That's part of the consultation in every setting that we do ministry. So, so that I mean, you could just imagine. I mean, if the conference started making that kind of appointment in places where it was going to be not just troubling for the congregation, but even unsafe for the pastor, right? In some of our communities, and it's hard enough being the church today without us making those kind of moves that can just kill a congregation. Right.
Thank you.
So, yeah.
Chris, is that going to that verbiage of consultation about the possibility? Is that about to be inserted in? Is it in? It's not in the discipline now, is it?
Yeah, it's already there. Yeah, consultation is required when an appointment is made, and that's the DS meets with the SPRC and the leadership of the church. Yeah.
So, but it's not specific to, the language is not specific to same-sex pastor, correct?
No, yeah, like I say, there's no restriction.
Are they going to add that language to that? No,
not this time, for sure. And there's always the caveat to these conversations, right? That who knows what the general conference will do in the future. But I think one of the misleading things that has been out there in the ether and these conversations for several years is that the United Methodist Church is becoming this big flaming liberal denomination. We're not. We are still a very centrist denomination. It's not so much geez, we got to get this progressive language in the Book of Discipline as it is we're just taking out the hurtful language.
right.
But we're still going to be a very centrist church, so those kind of things are probably not going to go in to the Book of Discipline. The Book of Discipline is just not going to make restrictions, blanket restrictions. It's going to allow local churches. So like I said, for example, building policies, right? The new Book of Discipline will not say it's explicitly that local church can create a building use policy around same-sex marriages, but it is not saying that they can't. And so it is still the job of your local church trustees and church council to make those decisions along with your pastor. So
Would they need to be written down if that were an issue?
The building use
Would they need to be
policy?
written in a policy somewhere?
Yeah, in a local church, you would want your trustees and your church council. Normally, the process for any building use policy would be for the trustees to write it up, to draft it, and then to get it approved by the church council. And it's the same way now for this. So your trustees can write up that policy, and the church council can approve it, and there you are. The church cannot restrict what the pastor can do. So there may be a pastor who's a great pastor in a more traditionalist leaning congregation who might do same-sex unions elsewhere. But if the church sets that building use policy, it wouldn't be within the walls of the church, right? So pastors still have discretion, local churches have discretion about what happens in their building there.
I see. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Chris.
Hey, Donna.
In Lahaina, I haven't really seen any, major firework celebration type things, except me personally. But what I have seen is individual people's relieved that, that this is, coming to more of a resolution. I think we still have work to do. I think we're cognizant of the chat among other churches in town, but locally, I think we're just relieved and that we can start going on. I'm very sad for some of the people that have left. Others, have probably wanted to be, in another place for quite a while. And this is just, what it took to have them go. But it is a sad thing to be missing people that you've always had present within your community and within your activities and stuff. We have had a couple new people come in after vote, knowing that this was an issue. One was a member of the queer community, and one was a lady who, I don't care, another church closed, and this is where she landed. So it's kind of cool. I do have a concern. And it's every change is going to bring forth a bunch of haters and disinformation, and in this world, oh my gosh, it is so much easier now to present that kind of disinformation. And do you know if the general conference communications, or the people in Nashville or wherever they're at now, has an effort going to help not attack, but to counteract some of the things that I'm seeing online? Just really, really hateful. We are demonic worshiping, gay theology church is, some of the stuff. And that's, as much as I celebrate the change, that's very, that's scary, and that's hurtful.
Yeah. And I think that, part of the misleading information that has been around for several years, is exactly that, that the United Methodist Church is being heretical around all this. And we want to continue to emphasize the articles of religion in our Book of Discipline have not changed. We are still Orthodox Christians in our Book of Discipline and in general practice. We have folks across this theological spectrum that we make room for, but as a denomination, we still believe Jesus is the Son of God, and it goes down the line from there. So you can find all of that in our Book of Discipline, and that stuff will not change. I think one of the things I think we are going to need to pay attention to is what you described there in terms of how our people relate to their communities now. For exactly this reason, the church down the street or down the block may be saying that United Methodist Church has followed the devil and has
They're all going to hell. Yep.
allowed itself to be transformed by the culture rather than being a witness within the culture. All of those kind of things. Some of them not as radical statements, but that are more subtle. You asked the question whether there are resources to counteract that. I think that's something that's going to have to be done locally. We're going to need to have conversations within our congregations about how to respond when you run into the neighbor at the grocery store who is asking you that question about your church, right? Or when you see those things. But I think the most important thing is that our churches just live the gospel. That's been the thing that I think we've said for years, that once we got to the other side of this, that both sides, the Global Methodist Church and our more traditionalist churches that have disaffiliated and become independent, and the United Methodist Church are going to be able to do ministry without being so overwhelmed by conflict around the human sexuality question. And so I think the most important thing is to be a non-anxious presence, not to get too riled up about what others are saying about us, but just to live it, be the witness that we know we are of a grace-filled faith in each of our communities where we are, and to show that so that people know that they have a friend in us. And that, I think, Don, is the most important thing. Focus on the ministry, right? What is Jesus calling your church family to be and do in your community? But having a response, help your people know how to have their elevator speech about why this church is still their church and why it's important. Its witness is important in La Junta and everywhere else. And I'll get stuff out. We'll send stuff out if there are resources that come out about this. We'll send it out. But I think the resources are probably already there in terms of why it's important that we.
And I couldn't think of exactly where it would come from. It's like the Board of Discipleship or
Right.
someplace that would have a, hey, we are still, open doors, open minds, open hearts. What does that mean?
Yeah.
Even, especially now.
Yeah. Most of us would say now we are. That actually does apply where it didn't apply before, really. So
I have had a shirt that says that since they very, very first started, that campaign. We got it from when we were at conference in Northwest Texas. And so, I've worn that shirt and everybody's going, what? Yeah. So we have finally lived up to what we have had the t-shirts for quite a while, at least 10, 15 years.
Yeah. And I think especially in this election year, there's going to be so much partisanship and polarization for us to really lean into the fact that we are a church that rejects that. This is a church where everyone is welcome, even when it's tense, right? That we can have conversations and disagree about secular partisan politics, but when we come together, we are the body of Christ, and we have unity in that, and we can be a powerful witness in the world this year when our neighbors don't have that.
And I do have a question, something you said, because I was listening to one of the press follow-ups after one of the day sessions, and they were talking about when it comes to doing the language of LGBTQ, and that there would be a penalty. Did you say that what did not make it? Because I thought I heard it say that, you can say this, but you don't dare say anything against the gay community.
And
that can kind of, that concerned me, if it being inclusive, that we had, somebody who really still does have a problem with the concept of same-sex relationships. and that they, that there's punishment for, for them not being able to say anything.
Right. Now, this is where I've got to say there is so much legislation that passed that we don't know yet what it actually says. What I have heard and everything that I have heard coming out is that there were no flips of restrictive, harmful language. That there's nothing restricting speech. I could be wrong, and we're gonna have to wait and see what the discipline actually has in it, because there was a lot that came out that was not discussed on the main floor of General Conference. It went through legislative committees, and conversations were had there. So I don't want to say for sure, because I didn't hear what you heard, but that would seem.
I'll see if I can go back and find it.
Okay, yeah, that would seem to run counter to what the spirit of the conference
that really surprised me, unless it was just somebody's take on it, or maybe it was something that was still being considered. But I thought, well, that's contrary to being inclusive. We don't want to include hate, but we need to include diversity. If somebody just really has a problem with that, then that's their life experiences, and that's their where they're coming from.
Exactly.
I don't agree with it, but that doesn't mean that they don't have the right to have an issue with the gay community. So
right. Yeah, I think the one thing that might relate to that I can think of is that there was a restriction, or currently still exists until January 1st, a restriction on denominational use of funds in support or advocacy for LGBTQ concerns. That was removed, and I think language was shifted perhaps to restrict the use of funds to support anti-LGBTQ.
Yes, that's the exact thing that I was talking about.
Oh, okay.
But I heard that, the way I heard it, I might have heard differently than what it was intended. I'll go back and look at it again.
Yeah. That's the one thing that you rang that bell for me. That may be part of it, but that's more about restricting the use of denominational money to do anti-LGBTQ stuff. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. We're at about an hour. Anybody have anything burning on your heart or mind that you would like to have said before we close up here this evening? All right. Well, I am grateful for you joining us tonight. Thank you so much. I'm going to say a prayer here, and then if you all would unmute and say goodnight to each other before we leave. So let's pray. Gracious God, thanks so much. I'm so grateful for all of our siblings in faith across this district. So much good work is being done in the world, and so many heartfelt prayers lifted up, and so much faithful and joyous worship happens across this district. And I pray that you would continue to bless everyone in our churches, all those in our communities who have the opportunity through our church families to meet you and know you and embrace you, and to become a part of your great family in the world. It's in your son's name we pray. Amen. All right. If everybody could unmute and say goodnight to each other.
Not
Good
everybody.
night. Nice to meet all of you, and have a happy Memorial Day.
Welcome, Janet. Thank you.
Thank you.
Happy Memorial Day.
Bye.
Amen. Take care.